We will now discuss the solution to problem 12-22, which involves a make or buy decision. This problem involves the Bronson Company, which manufactures a variety of ballpoint pens. The company has just received an order from an outside supplier to provide the ink cartridges for the company's Zippo pen line at a price of 48 cents per dozen cartridges. The company is interested in this offer because its own production of cartridges is at capacity. Bronson estimates that if the supplier's offer were accepted, direct labor and variable manufacturing overhead cost would be reduced by 10% and direct material costs would be reduced by 20%. Under present operations, Bronson manufactures all of its own pens from start to finish. The Zippo pens are sold through wholesalers at $4 per box. Each box contains 1 dozen pens. Fixed manufacturing overhead costs charged to the Zippo pen line total $50,000 each year. The present cost of producing 1 dozen Zippo pens is given on page 566. The total cost is $3.30. That $3.30 includes fixed manufacturing overhead. First question, should Bronson Company accept the outside supplier's offer? And they want us to show the calculation. In looking at this problem, the first thing that we have to do, we know that the costs that are relevant are the costs that are variable. And therefore we are given the direct materials per unit, the direct labor per unit. What we don't know is what the variable manufacturing overhead is. So we need to figure that out. In looking at this problem, we see that there are 100,000 boxes of pens that are going to be produced, and there is fixed manufacturing overhead of $50,000 for the year. If we divide that $50,000 by 100,000 boxes, we figure out that there's 50 cents per box of fixed overhead. So the amount of manufacturing overhead which is fixed per box is 50 cents. The total manufacturing overhead per box is 80 cents. If we subtract the 50 cents of fixed overhead from the 80 cents of total overhead, we arrive at the 30 cents per box of variable manufacturing overhead. Therefore, we now can calculate what the total variable cost of producing 1 box of Zippo pens is. It's $1.50 of direct materials, $1 direct labor, 30 cents variable overhead. Total variable cost $2.80. If the cartridges were purchased from the outside supplier, the variable cost per box of Zippo pens would be once again direct materials, direct labor, variable overhead plus the 48 cents per cartridge that would have to be spent. In this problem, we're told that obviously the cartridge is a component of the total pen. We're still going to have materials, labor, and variable overhead to make the rest of the pen, and then insert the cartridge into the pen. So the direct material cost, we were told, would be reduced by 20%. So it would only be 80% of the $1.50 as given. We're told that direct labor and variable manufacturing overhead will be 90% of the original amount, or the total amount, because there would be some reduction due to the fact that we're not manufacturing that cartridge. So at the end of the day, $1.20 of direct materials, 90 cents of direct labor, 27 cents of variable manufacturing overhead, and 48 cents to purchase the cartridge. All in all, the total variable cost per box, $2.85. So the company should reject the outside supplier's offer because it is cheaper by 5 cents to continue to produce the cartridge as opposed to buy the cartridge from an outside supplier. Another way to look at this would be to say what costs would be avoided by purchasing the cartridges. So in other words, if you went out and purchased the cartridges, what costs would you avoid? Well, you would avoid the direct material cost of 30 cents per pen, per box I should say. You'd avoid the labor of 10 cents per box. You would avoid the variable manufacturing overhead of 3 cents per box. And basically how that's figured out is that is the amount of variable cost that gets eliminated by purchasing the cartridges from an outside supplier. All in all, 43 cents would be the total cost avoided. Alright, that 43 cents compared to the 48 cents that it takes to buy a cartridge gives you the same solution. You're 5 cents better off. Okay. By purchasing by making the cartridges. Cost of purchasing versus cost savings per box by making the cartridges internally, 5 cents per box. Part 2 of the problem asks us to what is the maximum price Bronson should be willing to pay the outside supplier per dozen cartridges. That would be the 43 cents per box. That 43 cents per box represents the total cost of making one box of cartridges internally. Part 3 asks us that says, due to the bankruptcy of a competitor, Bronson expects to sell 150,000 boxes of Zippo pens next year. As previously stated, the company has enough capacity to only produce 100,000 boxes annually. By incurring $30,000 of additional fixed cost each year, the company could expand its production of cartridges to satisfy the anticipated demand for Zippo pens. The variable cost per unit to produce the additional cartridges would be the same as present. How many boxes of cartridges should be purchased from the outside supplier, and how many should be made by Bronson? Alright, so when we look at this particular question, we have three choices or three alternatives to obtain the cartridges. Number one, produce all of them. Okay, produce all of them internally. Alright. Number two, purchase all cartridges externally. Number three, do some combination. In other words, max out our capacity of producing 100,000 boxes internally per year, and then purchase the remaining 50,000 boxes. In order to do this, right, if we were to line up the cost for each by producing all cartridges internally, okay, we could look at it this way. Here's the three alternatives using the 43 cents per box versus the 48 cents per box. Maybe easier to look at it this way in total dollars. In total cost per box, to produce all cartridges internally, we learned early on, beginning part 1 of the problem, that it's $2.80 per box. We need 150,000 boxes. That's $420,000. We also need to add an additional $30,000 of fixed cost in order to enable to build up our capacity to be able to produce these 150,000 boxes. Therefore, the total cost to build or produce all cartridges internally, $450,000. To purchase all the cartridges externally, alright, we need to purchase 150,000 boxes. The cost to purchase a box is $2.85 per box. Total cost would be $427,500. And finally, number 3, alternative 3, would be to produce 100,000 boxes, buy 50,000 boxes. To produce 100,000 boxes, as we know, at $280 per box would be $280,000. To purchase 50,000 boxes at $285 per box would be $142,500. Total cost $422,500. So as you can see here, it would be cheaper to produce 100,000 boxes and purchase the remaining 50,000 boxes. We would save anywhere from $27,500 down to $22,500, as opposed to trying to produce all of these internally. Alright. Part 4 asks us, what qualitative factors should Bronson consider in determining whether it should make or buy the ink cartridges? They need to take into account the ability of the supplier to meet their delivery schedule, obviously the quality of the cartridges that the supplier will make. They need to look at what other uses for the capacity that they are using now to make the cartridges. Is there a better use of that facility? The ability of the supplier to supply cartridges if volume increases in future years. In other words, will the supplier be able to take on additional production? And last but not least, the problem of alternative sources of supply if the supplier proves undependable. In other words, if this supplier is no good, will we be able to recover? Will we be able to obtain the number of units we need? This does it for our discussion of problem 12-22.